All right, guys, Murph's here, and today I want to talk about this, a Remington Model 1100 chambered 12 gauge, as well as this, a Remington Model 1187, also chambered in 12 gauge. Now, longtime viewers of the channel will know that I've actually done reviews on both of these shotguns, so if you're interested in seeing those, you should go ahead and check the link in the description. However, today, what I really want to focus on, as I try to keep these two monstrous shotguns in frame here, what I really want to focus on are what are the differences between these two shotguns, and what might drive you to purchase one over the other. Now, a couple things here, guys. First off, this Remington Model 1100 is still sporting some modifications that I've made to it for other purposes. It's not really going to have a bearing on what it is that we have to talk about as much as it is something that we have to acknowledge. So, in addition to that, what's important to keep in mind is that the Remington Model 1187 is an updated and budget-minded version of this particular shotgun. Now, the Remington Model 1100 is still offered in the Remington product line. However, they make far fewer of them, and it is more targeted towards someone looking for a premium shotgun option or a premier shotgun option on the market, as opposed to this, which is meant to be a durable shotgun. This is meant to be something that is taken in the field and all those types of things. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and cut the video real quick so that I can get these disassembled, because watching me pull these apart really won't be all that interesting. And then we can get into some of the minutia about the differences between these shotguns. So, see you in a second. All right, guys, and we're back. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the very visible differences between these two shotguns. So, of course, you remember, the 1187 was the one that is in camouflage, and the 1100 was not. And if we take a look at our barrels, we will see, let's see if I can get these lined up end to end here. There are some minor dimensional differences between the makeup of these two barrels. Now, they are so minor, and we're talking about like kind of the dimensions around the gas system portion of this. They're so minor that with a small amount of fitting, you can get either barrel to fit in the other action. In the case of the 1100 barrel on 1187, you're going to need a shim, and for the 1187 into the Remington Model 1100 action, you're going to need some wood removed. However, it can be done if you are so interested. Now, the principal difference between the two shotguns does come down to the gas system, because the original 1100 was built entirely around 2 3/4 inch shells. There would eventually be a 3-inch Magnum version. However, it would not effectively run the shorter shotgun shells. You would actually have to do a barrel swap in order to be able to achieve decent reliability by the reports that I've seen. I've never tried it personally. I've never had a Remington Model 1100 3-inch Magnum. The 1187 was built from the get-go to run on both 3-inch and 2 3/4 inch shells through the miracle of some self-adjusting gas system that it utilizes. However, if you look at the pieces and parts of the gas system, you'll see that there's not a whole lot of difference. This is the same pieces, which, I mean, holding them up next to each other, I can tell no actual difference between them. If we look at the carriers and the op rod, they appear to be pretty much exactly the same. All the way down to even the stickers that they have on them in order to make sure that you replace or you put the gas system back together properly, which I find very interesting that they kept that going. Materials and all that kind of stuff seem to be the same. Now, when we get to the bolts, the 1100, of course, has fancy engraving on it, which the 1187 does not. We can see, here's the fancy engraving on the Remington Model 1100 bolt. The arrangement and all that kind of stuff is pretty much the same though I have just now discovered that it looks like my 1100 bolt has a small amount of damage for that bit around the firing pin there. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more closely here after a bit. But as far as how the bolt is put together and the arrangement, we have the, oops, you know what, I'm going to set these carriers aside, guys. This is becoming entirely too much to try to wrangle. All right, so as for the carriers and all that kind of stuff, we have our locking lug coming out of the tops of the bolts there. Firing pin arrangement, springs, detents, all that kind of stuff are exactly the same between the two guns. Now, what really makes this system very interesting is how the gas system is set up. So this piston wraps around the magazine tube, which is different from previous gas-operated designs from Remington that actually utilize the gas tube as part of the the magazine tube as part of the gas system, which diminished capacity and all that kind of stuff. Having it telescope more or less around the magazine tube made this lighter, maintained capacity, but also still effectively ran as a semi-automatic system, which I think is really neat. It's a cool, practical use of space. All right, now looking at our trigger mechanisms, as we can see here, they are pretty much the same, minus that the 1100 has had this extended button release added to it, whereas the 1187 is still rocking its smaller button. The only other real difference between these two is that the 1187 trigger guard is made out of plastic, whereas the 1100s is made out of aluminum, which this is kind of a cost savings, as well as somebody might try to tell you that they did it for a weight savings type aspect, but this is absolutely cost savings because, as we have come to find out, polymers are perfectly fine to contain operating portions of a firearm, not necessarily pressure-bearing portions of the firearm. Looking at the receiver on the 1187, we can see that though it is camouflaged, we have no fancy engraving or anything along those lines. Whereas on the 1100, we have quite a bit of fancy engraving, which I've always appreciated on the 1100s. Now, also our stocks on the 1100s are generally wood, though some were made with synthetic. We have some excellent checkering on here, a nice butt cap, and then this would also come standard with plastic butt plates on it as well. Whereas the 1187 can be found in wood, though it's not a terribly fancy wood, whereas the 1100 has a very nice piece of wood on it, high gloss and all that kind of stuff. It would be a much more cheaper version of the wood, but for the most part, you find 1187s with synthetic stocks, which are great for the field. They'll hold up excellent and all that kind of stuff. They're just not visually appealing. We do have an attempt at checkering here as well, though I have to say that the 1100s checkering is far more comfortable. And then, of course, we also have a hefty rubber butt pad. Wow, that was hard to say. A hefty rubber butt pad, which is great for sopping up recoil, especially since you're talking about the opportunity to be able to run 3-inch shells through this shotgun. All right, guys. So with that, which one would I prefer between the two? Well, obviously, I have both because I've always loved the fancy appearance of the Remington Model 1100. However, I also freely admit that the 1187 has a practicality that is associated with it. And that is what, at the end of the day, I am far more concerned with. The practicality type aspect of it. Now, one thing that I will say for the 1187 over the 1100 is reliability. Now, my current 1100 is still having some teething issues after a lot of the changes that I made, a lot of the updates and modifications. So I'm not entirely sure how much of that is my fault and how much of that is the fault of the gun. I have been running some fairly light loads through it here lately, but I've been changing it up with buckshot and slugs, and I've still been having cycling issues, whereas the 1187 is far less likely to give me those issues. So if you want to go back and forth on that, perhaps the 1187 is the better overall purpose, and maybe that's what I should have started setting up for competition use and all that type of stuff. However, at the end of the day, the 1100 just has that nostalgia type aspect for me, and that's what keeps bringing me back to it. All right, guys, short video this week. I hope you guys appreciated the content, and that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.